about the team that's defined by playoff misery, the Sacramento Kings.
Right. Okay, so in our the latest team for the what's going on in Sacramento, an interesting offseason for the Kings in kind of a positive way. So let's go over
a solid offseason.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go over it a little bit. So first off, they hired Mike Brown as head coach. Mike Brown had been lead assistant with the Warriors for 5 years.
At least 5 or 6.
Yeah. Well respected. Getting another chance after coaching the Cavs twice and the Lakers once. Then on draft night, they held the key pick, the 4th pick, where there was question about whether they would go with Jaden Ivey, who a lot of people had penciled in as number 4 on the mock drafts, or they would trade back. And instead, they went with Keegan Murray out of Iowa, who was still believed to be right there. That wasn't a reach at all. It was just a matter of whether they were going to, whether they were going to draft for need or they were going to draft, the best player. And, from everything I've heard, regardless of that, they just had Murray higher on their board.
He was awesome in Vegas for whatever that's worth. He was really
he played
good
in Vegas and in the California Classic. Am I right?
I think so. I'm not positive.
All right. So anyway, he shot 40
and he looks really good in summer leagues.
Well, yeah. So he averaged 9 3-point attempts a game in summer league. Now he's going to be the featured guy on their roster, at least in the Vegas summer league. That's what the stats that I have. And he shot 40%. So he shot the ball, very well. Also shot the ball really well from the field overall. And was one of the standouts of summer league. Doesn't always mean anything, but it's much better when your guy looks good. Averaged 23 points in 4 Vegas summer league games. And like I said, 50% shooting from the field, 40% from 3. Also rebounded the ball pretty well in 32 minutes, averaged 7 rebounds. So that draft pick, obviously going with a bigger guy there. So they're certainly going to watch him. Malik Monk, they signed with their mid-level exception. I thought they got decent value on him. $9 million a year over 2. I think they gave him a 2-year deal for $9 million or so a year.
Yep.
Then they, in the whole thing with them was the decision to trade Tyrese Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis.
They also traded for Kevin Huerter too.
Yes, that's what I was missing. So traded a future first for Kevin Huerter, or did they absorbed him into space? Right? What did
they traded a future pick? I'm looking up the exact terms on it.
Was it a second? It says maybe a second.
No, it was a future first.
No, it's a first that becomes seconds eventually. I'm just looking up the terms while you're talking.
Right.
Lottery protected in 24, top 12, 25, top 10 and 26 becomes 2 seconds after that.
Okay. So reasonably good value for a quality off the bench scorer, although I guess he possibly could start, but I don't know, but
solid wing player, solid contract.
One wonders why they wouldn't have just traded Bogdan Bogdanović in a sign and trade for Kevin Huerter 2 years ago, but let's move on from that. They've added some talent. The question is, have they added enough talent to break this drought? MacMahon, I do think that there is a measure of excitement in Sacramento that this could be it. This could be the time for the Kings to step forward. What do you think about where they are after this offseason?
Did you see that picture of the jubilant Kings fans coming out of a California Classic win? And the guy said, "We're going to win 40 this year, baby." I think
it was not said in irony either. It was not said in irony.
I'm scrolling on Basketball Reference. 2005-06.
So the last time they made the playoffs is the last time they were over 500?
Yeah, last time they were over 500. We've set our piece on the Halliburton deal. Look, Sabonis is a really good player, And we'll see if he signs an extension with them. But if that's a rental, that's a mess. And if they're not winning, I think they're in danger of it being a rental. One thing I'm very curious to see is what ends up happening with Harrison Barnes. He's on about an $18 million expiring contract. I do think he's a sort of not he's a lockdown. He's a decent defender, a pretty good offensive player. I do think great locker room guy. I think he's a guy who would be attractive to teams that are contenders potentially. I'm curious to see if they can flip him in to something else, or if they tried. He was in a lot of trade rumors last year. If they try to flip him in to something else, I think right now though what they have is a core that can be competitive, but it's not a top 8 team in the Western Conference, no matter how much Mark Spears crows about it.
Well, he's not the only one. Our guy Chris Mannix was saying they're going to make the playoffs the other day. There's been this weird push for them to make the playoffs. We're just going to play a game and just go through unless how many teams we think are better than the Kings, or the Kings are better than. Okay. Is Phoenix better than the Kings? Would say yes. Is Memphis better? Yes. Golden State,
yes.
Dallas, Denver, Minnesota, the Pelicans, the Clippers, the Lakers, the Blazers.
Yes.
Well, they would argue about maybe they would argue they could probably.
I'll leave the Blazers as a maybe.
So we got to 8 teams that are 100% better. And I don't
know if the Lakers, as currently constructed, are guaranteed better than them.
The Lakers and the Blazers are 9th and 10th on our list. And we
Right.
think they're better, but they could maybe have some flaws. I personally think if the Blazers are healthy, they're clearly a better team.
So let me ask you this. If the Kings make the play-in tournament but get bounced, will there be a banner in that beautiful new arena that I've been?
I don't know if there'll be a banner, but
there won't be a banner, but it would be a great year.
It would be celebrated.
Why not a banner?
Sure.
I think there should be a banner.
There might be. I mean, look, I feel Kings fans are great. I feel really bad for the run of stretch. I was looking through that franchise index when you're looking at it, their wins. In this 16-year playoff drought, they've won less than 30 games 8 times. Like half the years they missed the playoffs, they've been one of the worst teams in the league. I mean, it's just been a miserable experience. So one time they get the high pick, they draft Marvin Bagley. They don't draft, they miss out on Luka. They miss out on Trae Young. They miss out on Jaren Jackson Jr. It's just been a rough stretch for them. But
they miss out on trading down, which they easily could have done.
Right. They could have done that too. But, Keegan Murray is interesting. We'll see if Mike Brown could get them to defend. The last 2 years they've been the bottom 5 in defense. They've generally been one of the worst defensive teams in the league.
It's more than the last 2 years.
Well, right. But Mike Brown should help them be better in that area. My problem is just looking at their team. I just they are going to be a okay regular season team. The West is just really tough. And again, on a night to night basis, they just don't really have anybody to guard these good players on the other team. They have no real interior presence. If you're playing Domantas Sabonis at center, your defense is probably going to stink. We'll see what happens with Rashawn Holmes. Things ended pretty rough last year with him. Maybe that'll get better this year. And he'll be part of the rotation again. But I just think it's going to be a struggle for them, even with Mike Brown, hopefully giving them some more defensive structure to really be able to guard well enough to compete with these teams in the West to be better. To me, if you go down Portland's roster, Dame, Yusuf Nurkic, Jeremy Grant, if Nasir Little, he looked really good last year before he got hurt. He could take a step forward this year. I think they're going to.
Anthony Simons, they have Anthony.
Right. They have Anthony Simons. They signed Gary Payton. He'll be able to help them defensively. I think Portland's clearly better.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you're probably
right. So we're talking their best case scenario. Now Sacramento might be in a bit of a gap where the teams below them in the West are really going to be bad. Oklahoma, Houston, San Antonio. I can't think who the other team is. Somebody else that's
Utah.
Not trying to win. Oh, and Utah, they're going to stink too, almost certainly.
Utah.
So Sacramento's probably in a bit of a gap by themselves in 11th, but if they're in a gap by themselves in 11th, they're still not in the play-in tournament. So,
some of those teams in front of them could have injuries.
It's worst case scenario.
Yeah, but look, I will say this:
right,
Herter and Monk.
I think they're a late lottery team again next year, or a late. Is that progress? I don't know. I don't know if you can say that.
Herder and Monk are two guys that they got at no cost in terms of their roster. Both of those guys are guys who can
fill it up,
upgrade their depth for sure. And they're going to have games where they're going to score 30 points or 25 points and make a big difference.
Last year, the Kings were 24th in offense and they were 27th in defense. For this team to have a chance to be good, that offense has got to be top half, right? That's got to be their path to being a solid team, is like between De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis and Monk and Keegan Murray and Herder, that they just score a lot of points. Like Barnes. If they could do that, they could finish somewhere between 10th and 15th in offense.
It would also help if De'Aaron Fox was healthy. He hasn't been healthy the last couple of years. I mean, he's missed 20 plus games.
It's a big prove-it year for him.
Yeah. I mean, he's the expectations for him are weighing down on him, and we'll see what happens there. Interesting thing about Sabonis. So he has 1 year left on his contract, or 2 years, this year and next. He is extension eligible, but he's one of these guys who's in this donut hole, like Jaylen Brown is in. We talked about that in the past, like DeJounte Murray was in, where he's, as a multi-time All-Star and one of the best players on this team, he, especially with the cap going up, as Bontemps referenced, he is probably worth more on the open market than he can extend for.
The difference is they can renegotiate and extend him next summer, in theory,
using cap space.
Yeah.
But he's eligible to
the Celtics have done.
But he's eligible to he's eligible to sign an extension now. But it would probably be surprising if he does sign it. So how he performs this year and how he fits is something to monitor.
Are we sure that he would get more than because he would be eligible to sign for something?
You've been down on him, you're not down on him, but you've never been a big believer in him. I think he's a great player. I agree. He's not a number one.
I just think the problem, I think he is sort of an old archetype of an NBA player, right? As an awesome offensive power forward who's a minus on defense, right? Like that archetype of player has just sort of, it's become sort of a archaic thing in today's NBA where it's hard to win with that kind of player. You have to have very specific pieces around him, like a Miles Turner, right? Like in Indiana, that was sort of the optimal situation. You have an athletic center who can make up for his shortcomings on defense, who can also space the floor on offense so he can operate inside. There just are not a lot of those guys, and he was probably in the best situation he was in. So what I was going to ask was, John Collins signed for around $25 million a year. Domantas Sabonis could extend for around $25 million a year. Are we sure?
I think it's like 24.
It's somewhere in that ballpark. Are we sure he's got a higher market than that?
I'm not, because I agree with you. I think it's a tough fit to have him be a centerpiece player if you are trying to be a good team.
He's 26 years old, a two-time All-Star, high efficiency.
Yeah,
he's
never won a playoff series. He's an outstanding offensive player.
It is kind of his fault.
It's difficult to build around him.
Yeah, it's kind of his fault because of the player he is. Nikola Vucevic. Nikola Vucevic is a similar type of player. He extended a couple years ago for 4 for 100, roughly, with the Magic. I think that's kind of what Sabonis's market is. I think it's more real. I'm not saying he will extend, because I think they're in a situation where, to your point, Brian, Sacramento traded Tyrese Halliburton for him. They have a desire to keep him. They have the potential to have some cap space next summer. They could renegotiate him up, give him more money. But I just think if you get him to the open market, is there going to be a rush of teams trying to pay him $35 million a year? I don't know.
I don't see it. I don't think he can be the best player on a good team.
I agree with that. That's not in question. But I mean, look, he's been poo-pooed a lot because he got traded for Halliburton. I think he's a very accomplished player. I watched him a lot when he was in Indiana. He's been a central part of a lot of victories. He was in okay. I agree. I mean, I agree. He's not going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, But, he was voted as an all-star twice by the coaches for a reason. And
yeah, listen, he's a
really
good player.
In the Eastern Conference, when the Eastern Conference stunk.
I really like watching.
That keeps getting qualified. Okay, I got that. I really
like watching him play. He's a fun player to watch. He's a very talented offensive player. Again, that's a different thing than what is his market value.
All right. Well, we're going to hear from MacMahon after he watches him play for Lithuania when he is the best player on the team for the next week. So prepare that scouting report.
Don't you talk bad about Valanciunas. Don't
listen. Wait till you see those Lithuanian fans. The Lithuanian fans are amazing.
I'm jealous, man. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Wait till you see those Lithuanian fans. They bring. I don't know if they'll be allowed to bring the drums, but when I've been to games, they bring the drums. So I don't know if that's illegal or not.
Oh, the Slovenians bring the drums too.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus.